Hello, chums. So, I just want to pick up on a idea that I keep seeing going round and round on Twitter about AI generated content. If you didn't watch my previous video, which was about AI submissions and how students will do it, it's worth checking that video out first. But this will make sense even if you don't. So, let's talk about AI and time, and specifically time horizons for the submission of work, because I think there's this really strange idea going around that I want to kind of unpick a little bit. Let's get into it. So let's talk about this content and what I consider time factors or time horizons. So in a previous video, I talked about the fact that students will use AI tools to generate content. Okay, and I talked about the different ways that they might do that, and you can see a model on screen about how they may do it. Here's the thing that's really, I'm seeing a lot on Twitter that I don't really understand. Okay, so at its most basic level, students could use chatbots and other AI tools to take a prompt, use that prompt, generate content, and submit it. Okay, and that's been talked a lot. And if you look at a lot of the conversation on Twitter, and this is what's puzzling me, people are saying, well, this is the end of the BC or the passing grade. And I've mentioned previously that AI generated content is not particularly good, but often, depending on how it's used, it's good enough to pass, right? But a lot of the conversation on Twitter and in other places has drifted into this weird space. And the weird space it's drifted into is an underlying assumption that en masse, students will literally take the AI generated content and just submit it with no alterations or changes. And I just think this is unrealistic. And I just want to talk about this a little bit because it's really puzzling me. So, when we create assessments, there are generally two fixed points. There is the release of the assessment. Now, it could be you just release the assessment online. It could be that you do an in-class session on the assessment. It could be that you do a recording discussion the assessment and a whole range of other things. But there is always the fixed point generally where an assessment is released. The second fixed point, regardless of anything else we generally do for most students, is a submission date. And just for this example, we have a submission date of 4 p.m. on the 25th of the 12th, 2022. Okay, so let me unpack why some of the discourse I'm currently seeing I just don't buy. I don't find as realistic. So the assumption underpinning a lot of this conversation about AI generates passable work is that the students take the prompt, they use the prompt, they generate content, and they just submit it. Now, we already know from research and past lived experience, I guess, some students, for a whole range of reasons, social, economic, their own personal circumstances, and others, will leave assessments until it is too late. And in the past, that might be represented by students staying up all night. They might do rush through a draft that they write in one day and they submit and they hope that it passes. Okay. So I can see students in similar circumstances who may have left it too late generating AI content and submitting it in an unedited form because they've run out of options. There is already an alteration there to the time horizon because previously you couldn't really write something at 10 to 4 and submit it and hope it would get up to a passing grade. Here, you could generate something at 10 to 4, submit it, and hope it gets a passing grade, as long as it's not detected in any other way, right? But this is my problem. I just don't see this being the mainstream form in which students create and generate and submit AI content for a few different reasons. The first reason is we are discussing publicly and openly that the material, which I'll call version 1.0, generated by AI is good enough for passable grades. And some people have talked about BC grades, right? But the thing is, if we are already saying to students, the first draft it generates is just about passable, isn't it self-evident that most students will see that the potential reward for spending even 3 or 4 hours re-editing that content to make it better and to check it for things like the hallucinatory effect of false information has a really good payoff for the economic cost of the time it takes them to do it. So it seems to me it is fundamentally more realistic that most students, when they understand that the version 1.0 is passable, are going to spend time doing revision cycles, right? To take that base content and improve it. Now, there's a whole separate argument about, well, isn't that what we want them to do in the assessment anyway? And I've talked before that we need to accept computers exist, and that's totally fine. But in this example here, it seems fairly self-evident to me that most students are not going to submit the version 1.0. They're going to do revision cycles. The second thing is there is another change, I think, to the time horizon. If we release our assessment at 2 p.m. on a Monday, because of the way the AI platforms work, a student can have version 1.0 at 2:01 p.m. They can type in the prompt or the prompts, they can alter them, and they've got the base version, okay? Fundamentally, there is a time shift because the time that it takes a student to get from no draft to version 1.0 is trivial. It's trivial. And what that means is students will then have more time to craft and shape the submitted version, right? They actually have more time for revision cycles. And again, you might say, well, that's absolutely okay, because don't we want them to craft and work on their content? And we do. But you still end up in the same place, which is you don't really know what you're marking. You don't know which bits of the AI are not. And if you're, for example, assessing students on the quality of their ideas, you've no idea if the original idea was the AI or them. You might think you don't care, and that's fine. You know, there's all sorts of pedagogical reasons you might not. But my point is, getting back to my main point, the idea that students will just take the base content and submit it, I think is going to be the minority. I don't even understand really why we're talking about it as if this is going to be the mainstream method in which students interact with these platforms. It's just not realistic. It's just not going to happen.